Thank you everyone for joining. This is Kim Tran. I don't know if Kim DeVera, aka Mad Pimp, is on the line, but she invited me to the group. Working with Larry, Lyndon, and I guess Rydell for this stream as well. We're kind of, the thought was to talk about salary negotiation, something that we aren't typically taught how to do, especially as creatives, and thought that it would be worth for me to jump on for 30 minutes to talk through some quick tips and way to approach negotiations, as well as maybe a 10-15 minute Q&A at the end, or however long we feel that we need for questions, and then ways to follow up with me. So, a little bit about me. I am out in the DC metro area. I am what most people would call a quote unquote non traditional marketer and brand strategist. I actually graduated back in 2008, so right into the financial recession. And I graduated with a psychology degree from a small liberal arts college. Thought I wanted to become a lawyer, so started working at a First Amendment and media law firm. Quickly realized it was not for me. So while there, I actually worked on a lot of client events, marketing proposals, business development, and then I jumped over client side with Discovery Communications. And actually, I believe they rebranded to Discovery Inc. now. So they're the parent company of the Discovery Channel. Investigation Discovery, Animal Planet, etc. And so since then, got my master's in strategic communications while I was there. I was able to, very fortunate to be able to get the company to pay for my degree while there, and also carved out an informal rotational program for myself across corporate communications, across campaigns, digital media, audience research. And then since then, I've worked in different capacities across industries, mostly from the marketing, branding, and creative services side. Can you guys still hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, that was weird. I heard like a beep. Okay. And since Discovery, I have worked at everything from software technology to financial services at Capital One previously. And currently, I work for an internet infrastructure company in the internet domains. And my job is literally to market.com in the Latin America region. So I'm the regional business owner. And then I also support some of our biggest domain name registrars, from GoDaddy to Google Domains and a bunch of others. So just to give you a background, because I know as creatives, we tend to have, what corporate people will call quote unquote non-traditional. And when it comes to negotiations, I feel like that a lot of creatives, a lot of designers, a lot of marketers, we tend to undervalue ourselves. And today, I will walk through some of that and ways to overcome that when you negotiate for your salary or your freelance rates or your contracts. So, Larry, if you can go to the next slide, please.
Did it go next?
Yep. Okay, so I wanted to start off with this awesome art. If you recognize it, this was, I believe, last year or earlier this year at the art show in Miami, and it made the news because it literally is just a banana and tape, and I believe someone bought it for 120,000. And so the reason why I wanted to start off with this is to show you that just like how art is subjective, so is value. Okay. And that is the number one thing that I want you to remember. Larry, next slide, please. It's not enough to know your worth. You have to know what and how to communicate it to. And I don't know what the makeup is of this group in terms of day jobs or job titles or whatever. But if you guys probably know this, but our value is, compared to business, compared to engineering, compared to data analysts, our value is sometimes not as ranked as highly or as I guess as valuable than some of these quote unquote more important jobs. And I want us to remember that it's not enough to know. You have to communicate it in a way that translates to what the company or the employer or the client or even your freelance client values. And so how do you do that? I want you to think that, you're not just a graphic designer, you're not just a web designer. I myself am not just a marketer or brand strategist. There are skills and there is a specific set of knowledge that we are expected to know and apply in our everyday job. However, it's how we apply those skills. It's how we convey that knowledge and what value comes out of those. Services or skills or knowledge. And so a lot of times as designers or art directors, we tend to think, okay, I'm just producing, XYZ, but we don't think about holistically, what does this website lead to? What does this email lead to? What does this campaign lead to? And so as a marketer and as a brand manager previously, I'm just going to share some real life examples. My first job, full-time job, as a marketing consultant in software technology, we operated as an in-house agency. And so we had a lot of different clients needing different things. And I oversaw 2 graphic designer interns. And both of them had great skills. They had, very specific niche and industries that they were specializing in. But however, the skills that made them stand out to me as their supervisor, and especially as someone who had to deal with clients, had to deal with project management. I also inherited a team, and so I had to assign different work. One designer, let's call him or her Nikki. Nikki was really thoughtful about their work. We had a client. This was, 6-7 years ago. And so Facebook was still organic and a very different platform back then. But Nikki, on our first client project together, not only did what I and or the client told them to do, but they really pushed back and provided thought in terms of, okay, why are we doing this? What is the goal we are trying to achieve? And from there, that was their value. They made me think more meaningfully and thoughtfully about my marketing strategy. And that way, I went into client calls every time with new insights or new takeaways or new ways to think about our work together to make it relate it back directly to the client goals and objectives. And when it came time to actually make an offer, guess who we went with? We went with Nikki because that's how they provided value to us, and that's how they provided value that was standing out, that was different from the other graphic designers. So I just want you to think about that. Larry, next slide, please. So the next step there is, okay, value is subjective, and so your work is relative. And I want you to remember that your work is worth more to your client or your company than it actually costs them to buy or to pay for. Okay, I know that as creatives, life, society, whatever, our parents tell us, oh, it's just pretty pictures, you're just a marketer, it's always just fun ads or whatever. But hey, we actually move the needle. We grow brands, we build brands. We are, especially during COVID right now, with all the messaging, all of the campaigns that uplift people, that are changing different perspectives that are encouraging and motivating. Okay, that's all worth something. That is whether you can put a number on it or a price on it. Again, it's worth something, and that worth is relative. So the biggest disconnect now, I've been in marketing full time for about 6, 7 years now. And the biggest disconnect that I see when I interview designers, art directors, creative directors, is that they don't relate their work back to what our work is about and what we value. And so I don't want you to discount industry experience. However, no industry experience does not mean that you cannot succeed in whatever industry you are in. And as you can see, my background is so varied. And the biggest thing is to, again, take the skills and the knowledge and the type of work that the client will value and the client is considering worth it to pay for. And so a lot of times when I see and interview people, they right off the bat, they undervalue and they don't bridge that gap of what their work is worth to me as a client. And so quick example is that last year I was going through an RFP with one of our LATAM agencies, and I was brand new to the company, and I didn't have any personal buy-in with the agency. Sometimes I want to say, sometimes these RFP, someone knows someone, you have a connection, there's some bias there, I'm not gonna lie.
Kim?
And so I was brand new to. Yep.
Just for those who don't know, what is an RFP?
Oh, RFPs are requests for proposals. And so a lot of times clients or big companies, they have an upcoming project, an upcoming campaign, and they want to evaluate talent or pricing or different agencies and or freelancers. And request for proposals, short is RFP, they put out the out, it's kind of like a job description, but it's much more democratic in the sense that you put out a request for proposals. People look at the description, what the client or company is trying to achieve, and you write up a proposal in terms of you're basically pitching your services and how you can meet those services. And some people may or may not include pricing. A lot of times, we do, depending on the client, depending on the project, sometimes they'll share their budget. And so that's what an RFP is. And so last year, going back to worth is relative and making sure that you bridge the gap between what you're offering and what your work is about with what the client is actually valuing. Last year, during an RFP in LATAM, and LATAM is Latin America, as mentioned, it's my region where I'm responsible for. The creative agency in their client portfolio included a condom company. And mind you, we are a very conservative company. We are an internet infrastructure. That had nothing to do with our business. And that was a huge miss. And of course, that's just one example. And it's a very dramatic example, but I want to share with you what I mean by relating your work and making sure that your work actually aligns to whatever client or company you're pitching to and want to work for. Because don't discount industry experience, don't discount what they value, because again, whatever they pay you will be much less than what your work will bring to them in the bigger picture in the long run. Next slide, please, Larry. Okay, so we talked about value being subjective. We talked about worth being relative, but impact is objective. And what I mean by that is, and especially again in creative, services or in creative roles, we tend to, again, undervalue our services. We're not new at selling our services. We're not new at pitching it. A lot of us are experienced professionals. We've had knowledge, we've had skills. We actually, a lot of us have training, whether it's educational certificates or hands-on training. And so I want you to remember that when you go into negotiations or you're aiming for a specific salary or rate. Again, you're not new at selling. You may be new at selling your services, but you're not new at delivering them. And I bring this up because negotiations, we tend to think about it in very simple, straightforward dollar numbers. And we forget about the bigger impact or the bigger picture that our services will bring. And so, one example of this is I had a art director last year. He was trying to get promoted. He had been at the company for about almost 2 years or 3 years. And he was just great at his job. He was a great designer. He always brought great ideas to the table. But in terms of impact, he wasn't thinking further than what his work was delivering. He was thinking in terms of deliverables. He was thinking in terms of, oh, I delivered, let me think through here. I delivered this brochure in 10 days versus 15 or 20. Okay, great. But what is the impact of that brochure? And so when we talked and he wanted to make the case to get promoted, I told him, okay, well, great that you created this brochure in 10 versus 20 days. That can't really help me when I go to my director or my VP to get you more money, because we need to think about the impact that brochure is doing. And so what we did was actually reach out to some of the bankers and sales specialists who actually use those brochures. And then there was then a bigger impact that we could actually use and leverage to go back to my director and VP. And so the new impact, once we started reaching out to sales specialists and bankers, is actually showing that waterfall or halo effect of what that brochure did, and what limiting 10 days versus 20 days and having a brochure to go to clients for their sales pitch, to close the deal. And that brochure, even though it took him 10 days versus 20, in those 10 days, we actually netted a $15 million client out in Boston. So imagine if we had waited for 20 more days versus 10. We could have missed out on that client, or that client could have gone to a competitor. All these scenarios. And so when you think about the impact of your job, of your services, of your deliverables, think about the impact that is past your deliverable. Okay, how is it impacting other people? How is it actually delivering literal value? And that will always be objective, again, to the company and the client, and depending on what they value and what they think is worth when you go in and negotiate. Okay, Larry, next slide, please. So, like I said, the next step is to translate the qualitative. My art director, when he said, oh, well, I made this brochure in 10 days versus 20, and bankers could use it right away. And I said, okay, great. You came with an idea, you mixed up the brochure. My leadership is not going to care about that. What else can you give me that has a number? What is the impact of that number? And so I want to say again, art and design, it's not just pretty pictures. Marketing, when I try to explain marketing to my super conservative, super traditional family, they still think that all I do is go on photo shoots and video shoots and travel to different cities and have fun. Yes, that is part of it, but the other part is also actually translating all of that fun stuff to not so fun stuff. And That is also how I use those numbers to ask for more budget, marketing budget. It's like marketer, hashtag marketer's life. Without any budget, I can't do anything. And without campaigns, without marketing, you don't grow your services and you don't get more clients. And so again, going back to the first three tips, impact, value, worth, translate that into actual numbers, so that your clients, so that your employer, your company, when you negotiate your worth, you actually have numbers to back that up. And what I mean by this is, again, the story of my art director. Again, it's great to create a brochure in 10 days versus 20. That's just efficiency to some companies and clients. They're going to be like, oh, well, that's kind of your job, to do it well and do it faster, right? And that's not the story that you want to tell. The story you want to tell is, I got this faster in market for you so that your bankers could use this to land a $15 million client. And so I want you to think about that and translate that, because those types of stories, those types of validations will back up your negotiations when you put out a number, when you go into the proverbial negotiation room, and maybe not an actual room these days, because a lot of it is obviously everything is virtual right now. But also on the personal side, this will give you confidence. I've talked to so many people throughout my career now, and also kind of providing the basis to me, coaching folks to how to negotiate more effectively without, quote unquote, selling out, is actually psychological in nature. A lot of people aren't negotiating because they don't feel confident. They don't know how to communicate things. They don't know the stories to tell, or the factoids and the results to feature. And so I want you to think about that, because the minute that you know that you can translate your impact, or translate your results and deliverables into actual dollars, you yourself will feel so confident that when you go into a room and you give your salary number or your freelance rate, or your contract, that you feel confident and you are authoritative, and direct. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, so if it's one thing that I want you to remember, is that it literally pays to be creative. It's the top in demand soft skill. And I put soft skill in quotes because LinkedIn, and I don't know how much or how familiar people are with LinkedIn, but it's kind of like a built-in recruiting ecosystem, and a lot of creative professionals, a lot of designers, web, you guys, and I too, I used to have a digital portfolio, a website, personal website, and it did not generate as much demand or as much job leads as LinkedIn. Why? LinkedIn right now is where Facebook was 7 years ago. Their organic lead and reach is so great right now. And so LinkedIn puts out an annual report where they rank according to profiles, according to recruiter activities and hiring manager activity, what the top in demand skills are. And creativity has been number one for 2 years in a row. So has persuasion, collaboration, and adaptability. New for this year is actually emotional intelligence. And so when you think about these skills, and again, earlier in the video, I mentioned that, you're not just a graphic designer, you're not just a web developer or UX designer. For me, what has helped me be successful and accelerate my career, and have grown to where I am today, I had no domains industry experience at all. I'm brand new to the industry. I have never owned or worked in a LATAM capability. I don't speak the language other than very basic Spanish. And yet I own Brazil. I own our strategy for Mexico. I own all of our testing agenda for emerging markets in the region. And that's because I promote the fact that I bring people, very different people together. Collaboration, check. I am a creative problem solver, check. Why? Because the world of work is changing so quickly. Clearly, with COVID, you guys have seen this, but even before COVID, a lot of creative quote unquote duties are being automated. Like I've learned that apparently AI is now copywriting, or I saw templates for creative brochures and whatever. But when it comes to client and company, sure, they can use a template. Will it meet their goals? Probably not. Have you seen some of what the AI software has created in terms of copywriting? It does not resonate. It is not compelling, and it is full of crazy typos and grammatical errors. And so I think that's the one biggest thing, that as we head into this new world, when you negotiate, think about all these other quote unquote soft skills that will help you stand out and own them. On my LinkedIn profile, I actually promote the fact that my superpower is bringing different people together. That is what I do. And a lot of companies now, they're so siloed. Creative just works with creative. Again, they create, they produce, and then they don't hear about what their work has led to, or the types of impact or results that work has generated. And so I want you to, step out of the comfort zone and think about these skills or impact that you may or may not have been comfortable doing or promoting in the past, but that will be a strong standout point for you when you go to the negotiation table and convince clients, convince companies to pay you more, or to give you more benefits, or whatever form of compensation you are asking for. Okay, so with 3 minutes, kind of right on time here. Larry, next slide, please. I just wanted to say thank you to everybody. I know that negotiation, salary, compensation topics are very personal and very differential or variable to each person. And so what I have been doing is just, connect with me on LinkedIn. I just launched my Instagram at Your Work Inspires if you guys want to support and follow. I do weekly IGTV episodes. I just launched a series called Cash Career Cocktails. You can watch me mix drinks with whatever I have in quarantine. And I talk about, all different types of money topics, negotiation topics, but also career topics as well. And then my email for this is listed as well. So I want to open it up for Q&A. And thank you again, Larry and Lyndon, for setting this up and just, navigating all the slides for me.
Thank you, Kim. I'm going to have them type. If you guys want to ask a question right now, can you guys type it into the LectureComms channel above? And I'll answer. I'll ask him the questions as we go along.
And then Larry, is there a way for me to see the questions too, or
sure.
Answer them in writing if we don't have time?
Yeah, sure. The LectureComms is a few channels above the lecture hall, and that's where all the people will communicate. So I'm seeing several people are asking questions right now. So okay. I'm going to repeat them to you right now, and you can also read them. But also I'm going to repeat them so people can know which question we're going to refer to. So people are trying to be thoughtful writing. There's at least 3 people typing right now. As soon as they come in. So yeah, if you guys wanted to communicate with Kim later on, you can see on the screen. That's how you can contact her if you feel like something that you want to ask is really personal. You can also talk to her there.
Since we have time, just while people are typing, there's
Well, I have one question right now. Are you ready for that? Sorry.
Yep,
Uh,
sure.
So Gunja, she has a question. How does one negotiate on salary if there's a break, let's say 2/3 of a year in a career as a mother? So we
Yeah.
have like a gap, work gap.
So that's always something that, a lot of, I do feel, this is my personal take. I do feel like a lot of companies now are much more understanding of gaps, career gap, of, especially as a parent. Um, and so I do want to acknowledge that new wave. I do realize that, and I have personally have interviewed with uh, some of these companies who aren't as understanding, but I want, but at the same time, when you negotiate, um, it's also a conversation, right? A lot of us go into negotiations where we come from a scarcity mindset where we're so afraid to lose the offer or so afraid to lose the opportunity that we don't take the time to actually ask ourselves, do I even want to work for this company? And so back to the original question of how do you negotiate salary if there's a break? The biggest question is, how did you use that break? I have asked this once or twice now in the last few months or so. And some of the questions or some of the answers that I have received vary from, oh, well, I had an accident, or to all the way to, yes, I took some time because I moved and I stayed home with my kids. And again, my next question to that would be, how did you keep up with your skills, or how did you keep up with the industry, or um, your knowledge and skill set? And so again, I'm a mom, and so I totally get that, being a mom is a career in itself, and I'm going a little nuts right now with trying to homeschool and do my job effectively, right? But again, being objective, being um, speaking to what your career or what your company or your client is valuing or find worthy. You want to speak to that. So depending on what you did during those 2 or 3 years of gap, did you volunteer? How did you upkeep your skills? Did you take online courses? Did you serve on a board? All of that. And sometimes the reality is, unfortunately, you may or may not have to take a pay cut in terms of where you were in 2, 3 years ago. I would recommend that you do not go any lower than your last salary if you do have a gap. Unfortunately, again, while some companies have changed their stance, some of them are still biased, unfortunately. And research has shown that, unfortunately, the bias is greater with mothers and women than it is with men. And so anytime that you can show that you have kept up with your knowledge, kept up with your industry, you also want to reach out to your network, okay? People that you worked with 2 or 3 years ago, so that they can speak to your skills and knowledge, so that they can be another point of validation and point of reference for you, other than, the gap. And so the biggest thing is, again, show them what you did in 2 to 3 years to keep up your skill, and then show them that, again, that's not going to be a hindrance to your job or the projects that you want to work on now.
Awesome. There's a few more questions coming in. And again, you guys, if you want to ask any questions to Kim, you just type in the Electrocomps channel, like that's a few channels above. Next question is from Lyndon. Can you share some do's and don'ts of using LinkedIn?
Yeah. So this is an interesting conversation question, sorry, because my last big project at Capital One was training 250 bankers and sales support specialists on how to use LinkedIn. And a lot of them were using it for personal branding, which is great. Some of them were also using it as a sales generation tool. And what I mean by that is they were reaching out, outreach to clients, to prospects, and doing like cold calls via LinkedIn. One do on LinkedIn is make sure that it is not your entire resume, or actually that's a don't. So let's start off with a true do. Make sure that it's up to date. Why? Because your LinkedIn profile should be kind of like a appetizer or an hors d'oeuvre to your resume. And what I mean by that is give recruiters, give hiring managers who are searching for your skills or background, feel excited when they read your LinkedIn profile, especially if you're in a creative role. Show only your best work. Make sure that you're not, including 10 different bullets via each job. Your LinkedIn profile should be a kind of a flyer for your resume. Think about it that way. A huge don't of using LinkedIn is to copy your resume word for word. And LinkedIn, look at it as like a landing page for your resume. And what I mean by that again is, just the quick, most important things. You want to attract people with your best work. And then making sure also that you have all your skills, your specialties, your likes, interests, anything that makes you stand out. And again, make it updated so that when you share your resume and you can actually go in depth about your experience, your background, your skills. But that way, they know what they're getting into by looking at your profile. They know it's updated. And then also, a big do is reach out to former clients or present clients, reach out to former coworkers, former managers, and get them to recommend you. Leave a recommendation that there's written proof and it's public proof of who you are as a professional, not just from your perspective, but other people's perspectives as well.
Awesome. Next question is from Lyndon. Oh, no, not Lyndon. Jay Goods. How do you negotiate if you are pivoting careers and your cost of living is higher than that of a newly graduated student?
Okay. Let me understand. So your cost of living is you personally or the market that you're in?
Jay Goods, if you're here, if you can unmute yourself and you can ask the question directly as to elaborate what you mean by that. Let's wait for him to unmute himself. I think, what he mean? Yeah, great.
Hey,
Yes.
So what I sort of meant by that question is I'm applying for positions that are entry-level positions, but I've had a lot of experience since I graduated. But I'm still applying for those entry-level positions. How do I negotiate so that because I've got so much life experience?
Yep. Okay. Yep. Gotcha. Okay. So I have been in this position as well, so don't feel alone. And again, life experience, skills, background, going back to what point was it? Point number 1, point number 2, and point number 3. Okay. When you look back at your experience, I realize that you feel you should be applying to entry level roles, and I don't have all the details there, but unless it's super technical and very niche, I would dissuade you to apply for entry level role, because again, depending on what career you were in before, whether did you manage a team, did you lead a team, did you lead growth projects or expansion projects, did you have direct reports or indirect reports. All of those are leadership skills that are highly valuable regardless of industry. Okay. And so when you say you're pivoting careers, I would assume that it's you're pivoting industries, right? Or complete careers or complete function, completely different.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And so when you look back at that, you want to, translate again those skills that would be valuable to whatever industry you're pivoting into that sets you apart from a quote unquote newly graduate student or newly graduated student. Okay. And so giving you an example is I mentioned earlier that I was in First Amendment law and media law, very specific, very niche. And so when I was trying to jump into marketing full time, the way I did it was, well, hey, I actually have legal experience. I have a legal background. So what I can do for you is actually take on all of your law firm clients and or legal practitioners and be your marketing lead for those accounts. And that's exactly what they did. And I actually was able to negotiate $5,000 more back then just because of that. And I got promoted within 3 months to build out a brand new team. And so, again, looking back at your experience from your current career and where you're going next, okay? And that's why I encourage you not to just apply to entry level jobs because you have existing skills and existing experience that could be worthy or could be worth more than just entry level, and that's your standout, that's your differentiating negotiating aspects there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. I think that a lot of the positions, especially at studios that I'm interested in working at, are just like a hierarchy
Mm-hmm.
per se. So I wouldn't be qualified for any of like the mid-level positions yet because of my lack of experience in the industry.
Okay. And when you say studio, are you talking about like agencies? Like what type of work? Is it coding? Is it
Like animation studios or film studios in the
okay?
entertainment industry as
Okay.
an artist.
And so do you have project management skills? Do you have client management skill? And any skills, again, think about maybe 3 or 5 in your current career that you can negotiate higher than. Unfortunately, if you're only applying to entry level jobs, there's a cap on that, right? And unfortunately, that budget is much lower for entry level roles. And so while you may not think that you qualify for these mid-career jobs, I would still encourage you to apply. And whoever you apply with, whoever the studio, the agency, the hiring manager, they can always go adjust or speak with you or collaborate and let them tell you that, quote unquote, you lack experience, right? This is all you making assumptions. And so you should still apply. You should still leverage the skills. Look at those whatever those mid-level job descriptions are listing, see if you have existing skills or experience that actually ladder up to that. Your goal right now is to actually pivot and get an interview. Your goal currently is not necessarily to worry about whether or not you're qualified or, what experience can you use to negotiate. Your immediate next step is actually to get that interview. And you can't do that if you keep applying to entry level jobs at certain entry level positions and budgets.
Awesome. Thank you. Next question comes all the way from Italy. Are there specific techniques or books for translating your value and services into something that's measurable by the employer? Or is it something specific or that or it's something that's per case specific?
Yeah. So people are always, people ask me all the time, like, hey, how did you learn how to translate this and whatever, right? And I hate to say it, but I've had to learn by myself. Working across so many industries, again, I mentioned a career pivot going from legal to marketing. And for the longest time, people didn't want to take a chance on me because I had a quote unquote non-traditional background, right? But again, you it's taking it step by step. Okay. My You can't just pivot into a new career. I can't just, go into marketing right away overnight, right? It was again taking on very small, very specific projects, or building out the opportunities for myself to actually get those skills and services, or experience. And so, research what your current goal with your employer or client. Research what they value, first of all. Research if any of your existing skills, your existing services, um, are actually valuable or worth it to that employer or to that client. And translate it. One easy tactic that I have used is actually reaching out to recruiters and telling them, hey, please look at my resume. How much do you think I'm worth? It's very direct. It's a little, uncomfortable, but a lot of recruiters will tell you straight up. I had a recruiter back when I was, oh my gosh, this was 6, 7 years ago. And again, I was trying to get into the uh, marketing industry from legal. And I sent it to an acquaintance. I wasn't even like super great friends with her. But she looked at my resume and she said, okay, this is great, whatever. I would think I would value you around 125,000. And back then I was not making 125,000 yet. Okay. And I said, holy shit, like obviously I am so undervalued. And I am so underpaid right now. And so we actually went through my resume and she called out exactly different experiences, different projects that were valuable to her clients. And at the time, she was recruiting and marketing technology. And so, again, very, again, variable across industry, across role. In terms of specific books, honestly, and this is where my personal passion comes out a little bit, because and why I'm so gung-ho about talking and speaking about this topic, especially for women, especially for minorities and underserved communities, and quote unquote non-traditional and creative roles, is because a lot of books in negotiations have been written by, the likes of Harvard and academically oriented, big time negotiators, but there haven't been really any books for the day to day people like me and you. And if you think about it, we've spent decades or years in perfecting our skills, perfecting our knowledge. And, we've never been taught to translate that value until we talk to someone who will put a value to that. And so I would encourage you to actually generate reports, salary reports. You can use salary.com, you can use Glassdoor. I personally find that those reports range a lot. And so last year, or 2 years ago now, I was trying to jump from financial services back into technology. And I needed like trusted information, and I actually paid for a service. And I paid for a service called 81cents.com. And I believe it was $150 or $170 at the time. But what they do is based on your experience, and I have no affiliation with them. This is just from personal use and my personal recommendation. They actually pulled the quantitative data, like the numbers, the salary ranges for my market, and my experience and my background, but they also got real hiring managers in the intended industry that I was going into, to comment on the salary range, to provide inputs, but they also set up 15-minute free conversations with each hiring manager so that I could discuss more and get more insight and takeaways and tactics. And so I would recommend those types of services and those tactics. But in terms of books, I haven't read any one book yet that really stands out to me. There is a book that doesn't talk about negotiation specifically, but it brings in the psychological and emotional aspects of buying and of marketing and branding. And that book is titled Buyology, Buyology, from Martin Lindstrom. And that was probably one of the most interesting books that I have read that talks about the invisible aspects of buying and of value, and why we buy the things we buy, and why we put the value and worth that we do on certain things versus others. And so if there's one book from that perspective, I would recommend that. Another book that I really enjoyed reading, not necessarily from a negotiation perspective, but just again from a personal development or persistence perspective, is from one of Netflix's co-founder, and that is called "That Is Never Going to Work," or "That's Not Going to Work," or I can't remember the exact title, but it just came out earlier this year, and he really talks about thinking creatively, thinking past your immediate role or your immediate industry or experience or skill set, to think more broadly and to adjust and think ahead and be future forward. And so that was also a really great book.
Awesome. I actually have a question. It might be a personal one for me. I've been in this situation several times where you'd be working at a job, and then you later find out like a coworker has a exponentially higher pay than you, but they probably do just as much work as you, or maybe even less. At that point, when is it even appropriate to bring it up right away, or do you wait and find the situation first? So what would you do in that situation? Find out that a lateral peer is making significantly more than you, but has the same amount of duty.
Yeah. It's always a controversial topic when that comes up, especially from, a hiring manager or even corporate employer perspective. And my first reaction, if that happened to me, is how come my manager, does my manager know, is one of my first kind of like knee-jerk reaction or question to myself. But the other thing is, what does this person have that I don't have, or what is this person doing that I am not doing? And you mentioned that this person, works less than you, or relatively works or contributes less than you. It kind of goes back to, again, the impact, right? I think as culturally, I grew up in a culture where I traded my time, or I saw my parents work hard and trade their time for money. And so I grew up with that mentality. And it wasn't until I went to college and again, real world experience, and started thinking in terms of impact. That's when I realized that, just because you work 10 hours on something does not mean that your deliverable is worth more or worth less than someone who spent 5 hours on it. It's what and how that deliverable was given or delivered or produced upon. And so what I mean by that is, yes, it sucks. But when that happens, I would encourage you to take on a curiosity or learning mindset and talk to your manager. Give them a heads up. The worst thing that you can do to a manager is just randomly bring up salary and pay in your next one-on-one. Give them a heads up, schedule a separate time, tell them exactly what your intention is so that you want them on their team if they're not on your team already. You know, and first off, as a good manager, as a good human being, you should be looking out for efforts anyway. But in the case that they are not, you know, bring it up and say, hey, it's come to my attention recently that my pay is perhaps not up to par. You know, obviously I'm just spitballing here and we can talk more personally, separately, but, you know, bring it up and say, what can I do to bring me up to, you know, X amount of salary? I don't know how much your coworker makes or what the range is. But again, the biggest disconnect is, or not one of the biggest disconnects, in addition to not relating your skills, your knowledge, your impact back to what the company or client values, is actually not doing research and not being prepared. A lot of people go into negotiations and they just have like a number in mind, but like, why do you want that number? What is it based on? You never want to say that, oh, it's based on my coworker making more than me. Okay, so you want to again take that learning mindset and say, okay, what are they doing? Maybe they quote unquote work less than me or work less hours, but they actually get more visibility because they actually led a project that led to a $500 million revenue growth for a company versus my project that just brought in 400 million. Okay, so things like that you can actually come prepared. There's a problem, but you are also offering a solution and actually validating that with objective points.
Oh, excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
There seems to be, well, there's not enough questions to answer, or there wouldn't be enough time to answer a question. So thank you so much for this talk, and appreciate all the input that you've given us. If you guys have any questions you want to ask her personally, you can look at the screen and copy down the information. You would prefer us to email you at Your Work Inspires, right? At
Yes.
gmail.com?
Or
Cool.
just shoot me a quick you know, connection on LinkedIn. I use LinkedIn I mean daily, not just professionally, but also personally. And so I'm always happy to talk via there. And yeah, I'm happy to, you know, chat more on a more personal basis with anyone, because I know this is again a topic that's not openly talked about a lot of times, but it's also still pretty taboo in certain circles. And especially for creatives, I feel like, you know, we've grown up with a sense of lack when it comes to creative careers. And that's kind of, you know, the reason why it took me so long to actually pivot into marketing is because I thought that I couldn't make money or I couldn't make a good salary in marketing. And so I want us to, you know, get paid. So again, thanks everyone. And, you know, we'll talk soon. We'll see you around.
Thanks,
Thank you
Kim.
so much, Kim.
Bye.
That was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kim.
Bye.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you,
Thank
Kim.
you.